I pulled into my driveway earlier than planned and noticed the porch light on, even though I hadn't switched it on before leaving. As I unlocked the front door, I heard the faint creak of the hallway floorboard near my bedroom. Ryan stepped out, phone in hand, holding something small and metallic. He froze for a second before saying, "Didn't hear you come in." Before watching the video, please tell us in the comments, which country are you watching from? The object he held reflected under the ceiling light. It was my cufflink, one from a pair I hadn't worn in months. I looked past him toward the bedroom. The door stood half open, the blinds tilted differently than I'd left them. He slipped the cufflink into his pocket casually and said, "I was just grabbing a charger. Thought I saw one in here." I nodded, not replying immediately. The outlet he mentioned was empty, and the charger he claimed to be using already sat plugged in beside the couch. His explanation fit neither location nor sequence. He walked past me, phone still in hand, and said, "Man, this place feels warmer than before. Your air's working fine now?" I said, "Yeah, it's fine." His movements were calm but misaligned with the room's condition. The carpet near the bed showed faint impressions of recent steps, and the drawer of my dresser wasn't fully closed. As he entered the living room, he added, "You should really think about locking your bedroom when guests stay. Some people might snoop." I looked at him directly and said, "That so?" He smiled and shrugged. I waited until he left the room before walking back to the bedroom. The drawer he'd touched held my wristwatch case, but the lid was turned backward. The safe box in the closet sat slightly out of alignment, as if moved and repositioned without care. On the nightstand, the small envelope where I kept spare keys was missing. I checked the adjoining bathroom. The cabinet door was ajar, the same way it opens when someone searches through it quickly. The sink edge had faint water spots, newer than the rest. Nothing looked destroyed, only handled. I walked through the house once, methodically checking each door and window. Nothing appeared forced. The front camera log showed his arrival earlier that afternoon. I told him he could stay a few days while his apartment lease renewed. The footage confirmed he entered with his own key, as planned, but I hadn't expected activity in areas that were private. His access wasn't the issue. The intent behind it was. That evening, he ordered takeout for both of us and acted as though nothing had happened. During dinner, he said, "Your bedroom lock sticks sometimes. Might want to check that hinge." I said, "You tried it?" He shrugged again. "Just saw it when I went looking for the charger." He didn't mention the cufflink. After he went to sleep on the couch, I inspected the room once more. The missing envelope from the nightstand reappeared inside the drawer, placed at a different angle. He must have realized it was gone and returned it. The cufflink pair now rested unevenly in their box, one upside down, one upright. I noted these details quietly. I decided not to confront him. Verbal exchange produces denials. Evidence produces conclusions. The next morning, he left early, saying he was meeting his leasing agent. When I checked the bedroom afterward, the window latch was unlocked. That single oversight confirmed more than any explanation could. I opened my laptop and searched for small indoor cameras with silent recording modes. The data I planned to collect would determine whether suspicion was justified or confirmed. I didn't need to guess anymore. I only needed proof. The next day, I began noting small, observable details without altering anything inside the house. Ryan returned in the evening carrying a gym bag, saying his leasing paperwork was delayed another week. I said, "No problem. The guest room's still yours." He smiled and placed the bag near the couch. but I noticed the faint clink of metal when it hit the floor. Inside that sound was a subtle rhythm, like loose objects shifting against each other. I made a mental note and moved on. Observation works best when it's invisible. After dinner, he offered to clean up. While he stood at the sink, I stepped briefly toward my room. The safe door was slightly off-center again. I hadn't touched it since the day before. I measured the angle of the gap with my phone camera, capturing a reference photo. I also noticed a faint scent of his cologne lingering near the dresser. Unusual, since the bedroom door stayed closed most of the time. Physical presence always leaves traces, even when nothing appears taken. The next morning, a pair of cufflinks disappeared entirely. They weren't valuable, but they served as a marker. I checked the storage box, then the nightstand, then the floor. Nothing. I reviewed the front door camera footage from the previous night. Ryan was the only person who entered or left. I didn't confront him. Direct conversation distorts truth. Patterns, however, reveal it with precision. To confirm, I began subtle placement tests. I arranged 3 coins in a straight line near the closet edge, measured spacing, and photographed them. I positioned the wristwatch case lid at a specific angle. I left the bathroom cabinet open by 2 centimeters, exactly measured. These micro-adjustments act as silent sensors. Any movement exposes activity. When I returned from work that day, the coins had shifted out of alignment, and the cabinet stood fully open. The angle difference was exact enough to prove interference. That evening, Ryan asked casually, "You still keep those watches locked up?" I said, "Some of them." He laughed and said, "Probably safer that way." His tone stayed neutral, but his awareness of what I stored had grown specific. The statement confirmed observation beyond casual interest. I recorded the time of conversation in a private log. Each entry documented action, time, and context. Evidence builds faster when categorized. The following morning, I checked his gym bag when he left for a jog. It sat unzipped near the couch. Inside, I saw nothing unusual, just clothes, toiletries, and a folded envelope with handwriting I didn't recognize. I didn't open it, but the initials RB were written across the flap. I took a photograph from a distance and zipped the bag closed again. That small observation joined the growing list. Later that day, I checked my digital security app. The home automation system registered movement near my bedroom around midday, even though I was at work. The motion sensor log doesn't show detail, only time and duration, but the record matched the window of his stay. The pattern was consistent: entry during absence, brief duration, exit before I returned. The probability of coincidence had reached 0. By nightfall, I confirmed one more shift. The missing cufflinks had reappeared, placed on the dresser, but reversed left to right. Returning an item is often an attempt to reset suspicion. Instead, it finalizes it. I made copies of every log, image, and video. From that point, I stopped relying on memory. Observation alone wouldn't suffice anymore. Evidence would need to be visual and indisputable. I ordered 2 discrete cameras with motion activation and silent LED indicators. Delivery was scheduled for the following morning. When I saw him that night, he said, "You're working late a lot lately?" I replied, "Documentation takes time." He didn't ask what kind. The cameras arrived the next morning. They were small, black, and wireless, each no bigger than a car key. I installed one inside a bookshelf facing the bedroom door and another inside the hallway vent cover, angled toward the dresser. Both linked to a cloud account under a generic name. I verified that they recorded silently and uploaded in real time. The setup took less than 15 minutes, and no part of the installation was visible without inspection. Observation had moved from visual guesswork to automated precision. That evening, Ryan returned with 2 grocery bags and said, "Picked up some stuff for the house." He placed them on the counter, pasta, coffee, and a bottle of wine. I thanked him. Generosity often arrives when guilt seeks balance. After dinner, I told him I was heading out to meet a colleague. He nodded and turned on the television. As I left, both cameras were already live. From my phone, I watched the first feed in real time. 15 minutes after I'd driven off, the hallway camera detected motion. The alert blinked once, then switched to continuous recording. The feed showed him walking down the hall, glancing back toward the living room, then entering my bedroom. The second camera caught him pulling open the dresser drawer and examining the contents carefully. He lifted the wristwatch case lid, pocketed something, and stood still for a few seconds before leaving. His face remained calm, not hurried. He paused once to straighten the drawer, then left the room exactly as he found it. I replayed the footage twice, noting time, movement order, and direction. He took one watch, not the case itself. The exact model, identifiable by its red strap, wasn't expensive but carried sentimental history. Still, this wasn't about monetary loss. It was confirmation. I saved the recording to an encrypted folder labeled "Entry Confirmed." When I returned home, nothing appeared disturbed. He asked, "Good meeting?" I said, "Productive." The drawer remained slightly ajar, precisely as before. Proof creates patience. There was no reason for confrontation when verification was now continuous. The next morning, I set the cameras to motion-triggered snapshots instead of video. This mode captured images every 3 seconds during detected movement, storing them sequentially. I also marked 3 more objects for tracking: a pen, a document folder, and the envelope from my safe containing small bills. These items were placed deliberately in visible but inconspicuous spots. Any interaction would show in clear frame sequence. Later that day, I left again under the pretext of running errands. Within the first hour, alerts filled the cloud dashboard. The snapshots showed him repeating the same process, entering quietly, checking drawers, scanning surfaces, pocketing the envelope, and returning it after a brief pause. He was methodical. The footage created a complete behavioral map, precise enough for a report. That evening, I exported every sequence to an external drive and added metadata stamps to each file. File integrity ensures credibility. Unaltered data carries legal weight. The entire operation had produced verifiable evidence without confrontation or speculation. After dinner, he asked, "You ever keep cash at home?" I said, "Just some for emergencies." He nodded and said, "Smart. Some people don't trust banks." I answered, "Documentation builds trust." He smiled slightly, but didn't reply. When he fell asleep on the couch, I backed up all video to a separate account and scheduled automatic upload each night. The system was now self-sustaining. His pattern, already proven twice, would repeat until stopped. The next step was no longer about gathering proof. It was about planning outcome. Revenge, to be effective, must look like process. The following day began normally. Ryan brewed coffee, scrolled through his phone, and asked if I was heading out again. I said, "Yeah, same schedule." He nodded and replied, "Cool, I might hit the gym later." I left as usual, locking the door behind me but monitoring the cameras from the parking lot. Within half an hour, the first alert appeared. The hallway feed showed him returning from the kitchen, pausing at the bedroom entrance, then entering again. The pattern repeated without deviation. Routine, once learned, becomes predictable. This time, he didn't just open drawers. He lifted the mattress edge, checked under it, and examined the nightstand carefully. The second camera captured his hand reaching behind the lamp base where I'd taped an old key. He turned it in his hand, tested it against the closet lock, and smiled faintly when it fit. The safe opened halfway before the recording paused for a motion break, then resumed with him pocketing a small envelope labeled Receipts. The scene ended with him resetting everything to its original order. I archived the footage immediately and watched it frame by frame. Each motion was deliberate, rehearsed, and executed with familiarity. The absence of hesitation proved this wasn't impulse, it was repetition. His confidence came from experience. It meant my home had been his workspace for longer than I'd assumed. That evening, I invited him to dinner at a nearby restaurant. Conversation stayed neutral. He spoke about future plans, mentioned moving closer to downtown, and joked about upgrading from guest life. I said, "Guess that'll make things easier for both of us." He agreed. After dinner, I excused myself under the pretense of needing to wake early. When we returned home, I double-checked the cameras were still functioning. They were. Before sleeping, I placed one final test. An unsealed envelope marked "Final Payment" inside the safe, containing only blank paper sheets and a tracking device. The signal connected directly to my phone. It would confirm whether movement continued even after visible suspicion. By the next afternoon, the tracking app pinged twice. I opened the live feed. Ryan entered again, opened the safe, and removed the envelope. He carried it to his gym bag, placed it inside, and zipped it shut. That single moment completed the chain of proof. Theft had transitioned from suspicion to confirmed action. When I came home later, he said, "I'm heading out to meet a friend. You need anything?" I said, "No, I'm good." His gym bag rested by the door. I let him leave. The tracker moved across the neighborhood map, stopping near a local pawn shop. I didn't call or chase. I only recorded. Law doesn't rely on emotion. It relies on evidence sequence. An hour later, I visited the pawn shop myself. The clerk confirmed someone matching his description had been there earlier, asking about selling watches. The store's security cameras had already captured his visit. I requested a timestamp reference and left. Every file, every log, and every location now aligned into a single, verified record. Back home, I reviewed the collected data. Multiple videos, sequential stills, and a real-world transaction attempt. Each piece connected seamlessly. I compiled them into a single folder named Proof Complete. The next step wouldn't involve confrontation. It would involve systems, structured, factual, irreversible. That night, he returned as if nothing had happened. "Long day," he said, dropping the bag on the couch. I replied, "Yeah, I can imagine." He smiled faintly and went to shower. I opened my laptop and drafted an email to local authorities with attachments ready. The message title was simple: Residential Theft Documentation, Full Sequence. I organized the evidence into a single folder labeled Proof Complete and encrypted it. Next, I contacted a local attorney for advice on handling theft evidence properly. She instructed me to preserve originals, avoid tampering, and prepare printed copies. I also notified my neighbor Thomas to act as a witness if needed. Then I gathered timestamps, GPS logs, camera exports, pawn shop records, and receipts. Every file received a checksum and a matching label for chain of custody integrity. I duplicated all copies to an external drive sealed in a locked box. My plan required authorities to witness handover and document the evidence in writing. I scheduled an appointment with a detective assigned to neighborhood property crimes. Everything rested on procedural accuracy rather than confrontation or public shame. At the station, I presented the encrypted folder and handed over a printed index. Detective Morris checked each checksum and confirmed file integrity without alteration. He photographed the original camera units before moving them into evidence storage. Thomas signed a witness statement confirming Ryan's repeated bedroom entries and behavior. The pawnshop clerk provided a copy of the security clip and a receipt. Morris ran Ryan's name through records and found a prior petty theft incident last year. Based on evidence, Morris arranged for a scheduled interview and advised formal arrest procedures. I stayed available, offering additional files if required for prosecution support. They issued a formal complaint and instructed me on the next legal steps. The process moved forward quietly, leaving no need for public confrontation. Officers arrived at my door carrying paperwork and an arrest directive. They read the formal complaint and took custody of the cameras and external drive. Ryan appeared cooperative at first, then declined to answer questions during the interview. Detective Morris explained charges including theft, attempted sale, and breach of trust. The pawn shop returned the watch and identified serial numbers confirmed ownership. Ryan's landlord revoked his references upon learning of the arrest and evidence. Soon, mutual friends received verified copies of the complaint and footage. They stopped responding to him and removed shared access to group events without discussion. The court scheduled restitution hearings and evidence presentation for formal resolution. I updated my security, stored copies in an attorney's vault, and closed the folder. Ryan was arrested the following afternoon without incident. Officers arrived while he sat at a nearby cafe, the same place where he used public Wi-Fi each morning. They requested his identification, confirmed his name, and escorted him quietly to a patrol vehicle. At the same time, Detective Morris called to confirm that the arrest had been completed and evidence custody had been logged. I noted the time and updated my record. Every step now transitioned from personal documentation to legal documentation. The process had moved beyond revenge. It was now compliance through precision. Later that day, I received a formal acknowledgement of cooperation. The letter listed my name as the reporting party and described the evidence sequence as complete, verifiable, and unbroken. That phrase mattered. It meant there were no doubts left for cross-examination. Ryan's property, including the pawned watch and remaining items, was logged under case number identifiers. The court filing listed restitution and misdemeanor theft under Section 12B of the local code. The watch returned to me inside a sealed evidence bag marked Recovered, Verified Ownership. When I went to retrieve it, the officer at the desk said, "You did everything by the book. Makes our job simple." I answered, "That was the idea." There was no triumph in the exchange, only procedure. Systems respond best when humans stay out of the way. Back home, I restored normal settings. The cameras remained in place, not for fear, but for habit. Order once established maintains itself through repetition. I compiled a summary of all correspondence and stored it with the external drive. The attorney closed her file and confirmed restitution would post within 30 days. Ryan's signature on the plea agreement arrived in scanned form. Digital acknowledgement of wrongdoing without direct contact. Mutual acquaintances learned about the event through official channels, not gossip. The local news summary included a short paragraph. Resident theft resolved through security evidence. Arrest made without resistance. The article used initials only. No emotion, no speculation, just documentation. It reflected exactly how I'd written every line of my report. 2 weeks later, the court issued its final decision. Ryan received probation, restitution, and a suspended sentence contingent on repayment. The watch remained as exhibit until case closure, then returned with paperwork attached. I filed that paperwork alongside my other records, labeled chronologically. The outcome contained no surprises. Every step followed a predictable sequence from fact to consequence. Afterward, I removed his access credentials from my home network and deleted his contact from my phone. The data remained archived, but communication ended entirely. Each digital trace of him now existed only in evidence folders. No confrontation, no argument, just absence. That evening, I walked through the house once more, checking each door and drawer. Everything was in its original position. The quiet wasn't relief. It was restoration. Revenge, once complete, looks identical to order being reestablished. Systems return to default once corruption is removed. The detective sent one final message. Case closed. Restitution confirmed. I archived it under final notice. The folder labeled Proof Complete now had its last entry. Would you call this revenge or justice? After Ryan's sentencing, the system handled the rest. Restitution payments appeared in my account under the reference Case Settlement 2317. Each installment arrived on time, processed through the court's financial department, not directly from him. I saved the receipts and printed copies for record keeping. The process required no interaction, only observation. The efficiency of structured systems replaced any need for personal reaction. Consequences had become administrative. At work, a few co-workers asked if I'd heard about a local theft case involving a tenant and security footage. The description matched my situation exactly. I said, I read the article, and left it there. There was no benefit in explaining further. People value results more than explanations. The rumor passed quickly because the facts were already public. Transparency ends speculation faster than denial ever can. One afternoon, Thomas stopped by to return a tool he'd borrowed. He said, "Glad you got that sorted. Never expected it from him." I replied, "That's why proof matters." He nodded, silent for a moment, before saying, "You didn't lose much, but you gained a record." I agreed. The outcome had value beyond restitution. It was procedural proof that preparation works better than confrontation. Ryan moved out of town soon after sentencing. His social accounts went inactive, and mutual contacts stopped mentioning him. The incident didn't follow him loudly, but digital traces never disappear completely. Search results still listed the court document, indexed under his full name. Every background check would lead there. Some debts are financial, others are archival. Both last as long as the records remain accessible. At home, I repurposed the guest room he'd used. The couch, where he once slept, became part of a storage setup for my recording equipment. The experience reshaped how I managed privacy. Locks were replaced with keypad systems, and all cameras connected to a dedicated encrypted network. Each new layer of security functioned less as defense and more as structure. A predictable barrier that removed the need for trust. Months later, Detective Morris emailed me asking permission to use the case for departmental training. The footage demonstrated the effectiveness of citizen documentation. I agreed, on the condition that names were redacted. The department published an internal memo summarizing the sequence: detection, collection, escalation, resolution. My case had become a template. Precision had scaled into policy. Financially, restitution closed cleanly. The court issued a final letter confirming completion of payment and case discharge. I archived it, then sealed the external drive in a labeled envelope. The file's purpose was complete, but deletion felt unnecessary. Systems should preserve evidence, not erase it. History functions as a deterrent only when it remains accessible. One evening, I reviewed the original footage one last time. The still images looked ordinary. Just a man walking through a hallway, opening drawers, moving items. Without context, it could have been harmless. Only documentation gave it meaning. Facts, isolated, are neutral. Sequence gives them consequence. When I closed the video window, the house lights reflected faintly on the screen. Everything inside the frame looked stable, balanced, and under control. The same space once compromised now operated on predictable logic again. Order restored itself, quietly, as systems always do. Months after the case closed, the house felt different. Quieter, structured, balanced. Nothing inside was missing, nothing out of place. Each drawer, lock, and device operated with mechanical precision. I had removed human trust from the system and replaced it with verification. The difference was simple. Before, I assumed. Now, I confirmed. Routine became my security. The external drive labeled "Proof Complete" remained in a locked cabinet. I hadn't opened it since the final restitution notice. It no longer carried emotional weight, only data. Every video, file, and report existed as a closed loop of evidence. What began as betrayal ended as documentation. Revenge had not been about punishment. It had been about process. Systems handle truth better than people do. Occasionally, I received updates from the police department's training division. They had integrated my case into their procedural module on residential theft. The module title read, "Verification Before Confrontation." It used my footage as an example of how precision replaces speculation. Seeing the phrase in official writing confirmed the point. Emotion reacts. Documentation resolves. The outcome had become educational material. At home, I upgraded the network again, connecting all devices through an encrypted node. Automation replaced vigilance. Doors locked themselves at intervals, lights followed motion schedules, and backups synced automatically each night. Every sound, every entry, every shift was logged. Systems don't forget or forgive. They just record. That reliability had become its own form of peace. One evening, Thomas stopped by for coffee. He looked around the living room and said, "Feels cleaner in here." I replied, "Order replaces memory." He nodded, not asking further questions. People prefer closure framed as silence. Discussion only reopens what has already been solved. Ryan's name surfaced once in a mutual acquaintance's conversation. A casual mention that he had moved to another city, working freelance, keeping to himself. I listened and said nothing. Everyone eventually resets their narrative. Systems, however, remember the original sequence. His record remained in public databases, factual and permanent. That was enough. When I checked my storage cabinet later that night, the drive indicator light blinked steadily, like a pulse. It reminded me that every story, once completed, still exists somewhere in data form. Erasing it wouldn't change what happened. Preserving it ensures accuracy if ever questioned. Truth doesn't need attention, only retention. I wrote a short note in my logbook. Evidence restores balance. That was the final entry. The book contained no anger, no satisfaction, just timestamps and verified outcomes. Each page led to closure by structure, not emotion. Revenge, when reduced to order, becomes indistinguishable from justice. The next morning, sunlight reflected off the kitchen counter exactly where the first camera had once faced. I unplugged the remaining devices and stored them. The system no longer needed to observe. It had already proven everything it was built to prove. The process was complete. I left the house for work, locked the door, and paused once at the gate. The same street, the same air, but a different structure underneath. Trust had transformed into architecture. The difference was invisible, yet absolute. What would you have done differently? Comment your opinion below. Thanks for watching. Like, share, and subscribe for more real stories.